So the story that I want to tell is that of the Shippee-Johnson Peruvian expedition of 1931. In 1931, geologist Robert Shippee and photographer George Johnson led an American Geographical Society expedition to the Peruvian Andes. And during this expedition, they collected, besides some field photography, also vertical and oblique photographs from the air of various landscapes. The focus of the expedition was actually on archaeological sites. And this expedition was heavily covered in the United States in those days, particularly because their team rediscovered, of course, the locals knew about it, but rediscovered the Great Wall of Peru, not the Great Wall of China, and documented it. But they also took other pictures, and I will come to that. The two pilots flew two Bellanca Peacemaker monoplanes, the Washington and the Lima. They were retrofitted so that they could actually fly at high altitudes of 20,000 feet and higher in those days, a pretty big deal for these type of planes. And they flew over the period of around 8 months, over 450 flight hours. The story of the collection is a really interesting one. Only as a side note, it went to the American Museum of Natural History in New York. And at one point, the museum actually wanted to destroy the collection because they needed some space. But the curator of South American archaeology stopped it and preserved it. So we help with the preservation nowadays, and that was also funded by UM-D. Because we are in the process of digitizing the whole collection of over 3,500 black and white photographs. Almost 2,000 of them are oblique photos, which means you sit in a plane and take a picture like 45 angles at the landscape. And I visited the collection and went through 3,500 photographs in 3 days and collected then, or selected 350 ones that show glaciers from 1931. So this has never been done before. Maybe sometimes here and there, a researcher found a single photograph and repeated it. But 350 of them, that is definitely unique. So the pictures are mounted on cardboard, some very rudimentary notes like photographer Johnson and so forth, but otherwise no information. And then we digitized it, as you see on the right side. So our study area is in southern Peru, the Cordillera Canota. It's the second largest mountain range in Peru, and it's close to, maybe you know that, Calcaya ice cap, which is nowadays the second largest tropical ice cap after Corupuna. Beautiful landscape, and I all invite you to join me next year. These are 3 examples for our study sites that we focus on: Sibinacocha, Huararumicocha, and Ostangate, highest mountain in the range. And these red polygons show you 3 glacier tongues that we want to focus on. So the problem is that in 1931, the 2 pilots didn't take any notes about where they were in the air. There is no logbook at all, no GPS, of course. So we had to reconstruct the flight path first. And as easy as it sounds, we jumped into Google Earth that you all hopefully have installed on your computer. And sometimes you fly through landscapes, maybe German landscapes. But here, in the case of Peru, students mainly and also colleagues fly through the area and try to match a 1931 photograph with a 2020-21 satellite image. And that's a very challenging undertaking. So once that's done, we have some photo pairs that I want to show you that look like the following. Here's the peak area, and you always see in black and white the photograph from 1931, and this is the Google Earth imagery. Here's a beautiful glacial lake. There was no lake 90 years ago. All that ice has melted and created the lake. We fly around the range. This is the main pass over the range. It was totally glaciated. almost impossible to walk over it. Today, totally ice-free. And we go into the foreland, Sibinacocha Lake, and also more glaciation in the background. So what my students are doing in the moment is, they use a special software, and we generate bitonal images, so black and white images. And with that software, we are able to count, in simple words, white pixels in the image. And for these glacier tongues that I selected here, we have already a recession of these glaciers between, let's say 10 and almost 60%. When we look at entire ranges here on the left side, Ausangate, beautiful, we do the same bitonal images now for entire walls and peaks of the range. And the glacier recession here from 1931 to 2019, so also almost 90 years, is between 40 and 50%. We are pretty lucky. So some of these photographs by accident, we assume, overlap. And what does that mean? So when you look at an object, you see it in 3D because you look at it from two different angles, right? If you close your one eye, you see the object in front of you two-dimensional, actually, only the brain makes up for it, But so we have these overlapping images, and through photogrammetric methods, we can produce digital elevation models, 3D models from 1931. Has never been done before. We then compare the 1931 images here in a two-dimensional way first with satellite imagery from the 1960s, with declassified corona spy images until today. And we already see here in these 3 test sites, so valley glaciers, that we have a glacial retreat or recession of between 50 and 94%. That's actually is the pass that is more or less ice-free 90 years later. But we can go further in our approach. So we just said that from 1931, we have the surface elevation, and we compare that with the glacier elevation 90 years later, and we can see how the glacier dropped in elevation, and we can calculate in the end water equivalents that we can give communities to work with. Next year, we want to fly again. We did that in 2019 for some selected pictures, but we want to do that again and repeat many of these photographs. I run through this. We think that historical photographs can be used in analysis that we are interested in. They're very helpful, and it's like a treasure trove for environmental change analysis. I want to thank my graduate students, Elise Arnott and Roberto Marimon, and undergrad students, Katie Trude and Kristen Bowen. Thank you very much.